In a bit of a change to what we normally do on this channel, I'd like to take a moment to talk about Showdown, Legends of Wrestling, a game that I think has one of, if not the, greatest character roster in any wrestling game to date. Now, I know the game is far from perfect, some would even say the gameplay itself is totally broken. There could have been a great game here if it wasn't for the dodgy hit detection and constant glitches, especially on the PS2 version. Nevertheless, I feel it would be good to go through the roster and show you guys what this game was all about. So after Acclaim was done making the old WWF and WCW games, they started work on the Legends of Wrestling games. Legends of Wrestling is exactly what it says on the tin, a game featuring superstars from the 70s, 80s and 90s. I believe the Legends of Wrestling games were developed long before WWE were throwing legend contracts at past superstars, so Acclaim wouldn't have to seek WWE's permission to use the superstars in this game. At least that's what I think. The first two Legends of Wrestling games looked quite rough around the edges, especially the first one. It wasn't until Showdown, Legends of Wrestling hit the shelves that the game got some much needed polish. It looks good for its time, but admittedly, it doesn't play too good. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's frustrating. But more on that later on. So before we look at the gameplay, let's look at the extensive roster. Take a deep breath, here we go. We have Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, The Iron Sheik, Andre the Giant, Don Morocco, Sid Vicious, The Dynamite Kid, The British Bulldog, Dory Funk, Terry Funk, Bruno Sammartino, Big John Studd, Ted DiBiase, Diamond Dallas Page, The Macho Man Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, Eddie Guerrero, Sting, Dusty Rhodes, Killer Kowalski, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Bam Bam Bigelow, Paul Orndorff, Greg Valentine, Scott Steiner, Rick Steiner, Road Warrior Hawk, Road Warrior Animal, Brian Knobbs, Jerry Saggs, Roddy Piper, Nikolai Volkov, Abdullah the Butcher, Kerry Von Erich, Mil Mascaras, Brian Pillman, Nikita Koloff, Ivan Koloff, The Original Sheik, Sabu, Tito Santana, Ivan Putski, Kevin Von Erich, Fritz Von Erich, Jimmy Hart, Captain Lou, Rick Martel, Jerry the King Lawler, Coco Beware, Jimmy Snuka, Baron Von Raschke, One Man Gang, Eddie Gilbert, Bob Orton, Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, Andy Kaufman, Mr. Fuji, Bobby Heenan, the Grand Wizard of Wrestling, Jake Roberts, Kurt Hennig, Ravishing Rick Rude, Superstar Billy Graham, Bob Backlund, Jim Duggan, George the Animal Steel, King Kong Bundy, and finally Harley Race. Now that is an insane roster. For fans of old school wrestling, this is a dream come true. Even more awesome is the fact that each superstar has 4 attires based on different eras. So for example, you can have NWO Hogan and you can have Real American Hulkster. It's up to you. It truly is one of the greatest rosters in the history of wrestling games. It's also kinda like a who's who of wrestling bios videos that I've done in the past, with the likes of Superstar Billy Graham, Sid Vicious, even Dynamite Kid, all playable. Of course, these guys also need arenas to wrestle in that reflect the time periods of the past, and the arenas are also amazing. You can choose between Madison Square Garden, the Boston Garden, Maple Leaf Garden, the Pontiac Silverdome, Wembley Stadium, the Omni, Tokyo Dome, Texas Stadium, the Spectrum, Moscow, COBO Arena, the Legends Coliseum, the LA Sports Arena, Cow Palace, Skydome, Greensboro Coliseum, Dory Funk's Gym, and the Mid-South Coliseum. Man, really, for me, this game sounded like an absolute dream come true when I was younger, and even now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I'd like to think, I still look back at this game and think of the possibilities. Let's show some gameplay clips here so you can see the issues the game has though. But before showing the gameplay, take a quick look at this. Bret Hart does a voiceover within the game to give you tips on how to play Legends of Wrestling. This is cool. Bret Hart is educating you on how to play a wrestling game. Amazing. So first off, the entrances aren't great, but they are passable. The theme music for the most part are rip-offs of licensed tunes used by the superstars in their respective companies. It's fine though, the entrances are never super important anyway. We have a WCW team providing commentary for the game, with Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan and Larry Zbyszko calling the action. While it's really special to hear these guys calling matches together in a video game, especially Bobby Heenan, unfortunately the commentary does get a bit repetitive quite quickly, even during one match. The best way I can explain the gameplay is like a mix between the old WWF Acclaim games like Warzone or Attitude, mixed with WCW Mayhem. That's a bad description, I know, but allow me to explain. The wrestlers' movements around the ring is quite similar to Warzone, Attitude and the PS1 ECW games. As you can see here, the game looks great for a PS2 game, the arenas look really good and the wrestler models really aren't that bad, if not a little cartoony. But the way the characters move, it's just not great. Made worse by the fact you need to be pretty close to your opponent to land strikes, and if you aren't, you end up leaving yourself open for an attack. Grapples are simple enough. Moves can be comboed into variations of other moves. So for example, you can lift your opponent up for a suplex, but tapping a button will change the move into maybe a front suplex or a cutter. It sounds intuitive and it sounds fun, but it doesn't really work. The problem here being, just like strikes, you need to be so close to your opponent to lock up, and even then it's a 50-50 chance whether your lockup is actually going to work. You have two status bars to look at. The green bar is your health and the yellow bar is your momentum. This works very much like Warzone and Attitude on the PS1, where you need to fill up your momentum meter to perform a finisher. Luckily, once filled up, it won't disappear after a few seconds of not performing your move, so at least there's that. The best way to describe the game is just really clunky. Your character doesn't turn to face your opponent quick enough. The reach of your character is quite woeful, and it feels like there is a delay anytime you press a button. You settle in to play some insane dream matches like Kevin Von Erich vs Psycho Sid or Sting vs Superstar Billy Graham, trying to really get into the game and create matches you could only dream of, but you end up becoming quite frustrated as performing simple tasks seems more like a game of chance. It's an incredible shame. Game modes are limited here too. Legends of Wrestling 2 let you pick a territory and there would be dialogue between the booker and your wrestler. It was long and it was tedious, but it was still a really good idea. Showdown here has none of that. You instead work your way through different eras in wrestling, playing a certain amount of matches per decade. The problem is, you quickly get tired of playing as the same character and it feels like a chore to continue, so you end up exiting and setting up an exhibition match. There's also a mode where you can relive classic matches, which also unlock further classic matches the more you win. Nothing special here, you can set these up in exhibition if you so desire, so it's kinda pointless. So, match types. There are a few match types to choose from, and they all play well for what they are. The list is Standard, Hardcore, Cage, Table, Ladder, Iron Man, First Blood, and Best 2 out of 3. Cage match is my favourite, just because you can moonsault off the side of the cage quite easily. Also, look at the size of this steel cage. Notice when you fall off though, you're right back up as if nothing ever happened. Learn to sail, brother. I will say this though, if you can put up with the amount of imperfections and glitches in the game, you can find some fun here, but you really need to adjust to the game and try not to get frustrated. I had this game when I was a kid on the old original Xbox, along with Legends of Wrestling 2, and I think I was just disappointed in it and wanted to play other games instead. To make this video, I spent an evening getting back into it, and I must say it's kind of refreshing to play something that isn't a 2K wrestling game for a change. Showdown isn't a hard game, but it's hard to stick with it. When you win a match after pulling off a finisher perfectly, you do feel like you've achieved something. Matches can be hard fought, but the problem is, it isn't the AI that's giving you the challenge, it's the game mechanics themselves. All in all, if you like old school wrestling, especially from the territory days, which I know loads of my viewers do, you will love the roster and you will love the different attires. The arenas are really good too, and hearing Bobby Heenan calling the action is pure nostalgia. But it's a difficult game to recommend casuals, especially with the amount of gameplay issues and glitches. Old school gamers and old school wrestling fans, yeah, we have put up with a lot of shit, so going back and playing Showdown Legends of Wrestling may not be that bad for some of us. Some, like myself, will find joy in setting up old school fantasy matches. Where else can you pit Owen Hart against Sabu or Kevin Von Erich versus Sid Vicious? For that alone, it's worth a shot.